So last night I watched the video that most of us have been waiting for from Douglas Vogt over at Diehold Foundation. What exactly is going to happen? Where is it safe? Is it really going to happen in 2046? And, well, is this the final verdict? We're going to talk about that just briefly. I think I figured out where I want to go with these videos, or at least the format. But before we do that, I'm going to show you my version of winter that has reappeared. Luckily, we're not getting tons of snow, but the weather seems a little bit fitting for the bad news if you actually watch the video. I'll link that video below, but first we're going to take a deep breath, see what's coming on the other side. I don't like it. It's cold, isn't it? So as you know, when it's windy here in New Mexico, there's absolutely nowhere I can go. But right now it's so cold and windy and it's trying to snow outside. There's no way I can record video. But I don't know about you, but I watched the video yesterday about where technically the safe places will be. And I was left with a pretty hollow feeling in that there aren't any. I think most of us kind of knew that that was coming. And if you actually start applying the math, you'll realize even if you could find a safe place, if you're looking at 30 to 50 years of snow post-solar event, that means if you were born in the year 2000, you'll be almost 80 years old before you can really go outside and see the sun. So for most of us, for anybody over 20, it's wildly unrealistic to think that we would even be, necessary for what's coming. But that doesn't eliminate the fact that this is really a big idea. And Mr. Vogt and Ben Davidson did the same thing, where they tried to be helpful by just throwing the 5 stages of grief at you. And as you've heard me say before, that's my background. I know about death. I know about loss. I know about trauma. I know about not just the mental and emotional part, but that's my area, how it affects us physically, how we can work with it. And so as much as that seems to be the easy response to the 5 stages of grief, it's not even a practical or valid idea, because this isn't the 5 stages of grief. And if you really examine the literature, the 5 stages of grief is something that's being moved away from within the mental health community. So that's just an easy answer for people who are trying to talk about something that's not in their area of expertise, which brings me to where are we going with these videos. And if you saw in the title, Earth Catastrophe Countdown, I think there's so much to talk about in this genre, in this subject, about what's really going to be happening with us versus trying to figure out what's happening out there in the world. And when you take survival off the table for almost everybody, that's a dynamic that we haven't really experienced in this world. And if you see the second part of my title, it's called Counting Down with Courage. And so this is really the area that I want to talk about. But part of what's happening in these videos is that mostly I'm too distracted to give you a very good conversation. Right now there's a limited amount of distractions, but when I'm outside or, with the camera, I'm trying to see if it's focused on my in frame. Are there snakes on the ground? What's Freedom doing? On and on and on. And so I think for my understanding of how we process information, audio is actually the best format. And people who listen to long-form audio are probably much more in alignment with my ideas that I'm trying to communicate. The video format, I think, is a wonderful visual format, and so I'm going to retain that for making things visually interesting. But I'm moving the real discussion off of YouTube and over to my website. It's free content. I'll explain more about what it is. You'll find it on the blog roll page, and you'll also find it on the link below this video. And I really want to dive into the big questions. And, I'll just give you a synthesis of what I talked about over in this long podcast. It's a 30-minute podcast. But the most important thing to remember, and this is why the 5 stages of grief is irrelevant, is that this isn't happening to one person. This isn't one person who's getting a terminal diagnosis and then they have the rest of the world to help them cope. This is happening, if it's true, to everybody. There will be no coping entity, mechanism, system, because everybody is going to be having the same experience. There's nobody who's been through this experience. There's no system in place that can make this experience be okay. It's when you hear these words, if this idea is true, there is no being safe in the world ever again. And so much of our primary motivation is finding a way to be safe and secure in the world. When you hear this kind of idea, there's no control. You cannot control this outcome. And even if there's a few people who can survive, that isn't going to be the majority of us. And the reality is when people feel out of control, that doesn't usually bode well for everybody else around them. So there are so many aspects to this that I think are worth exploring. And when I say countdown to courage, I think we have to make a decision. And one of the decisions I've made is I don't like engaging with people who are trying to have me convince them that I'm right and they're wrong. I don't see that as productive, and that's not my purpose or my goal here, because the reality is we all have our own belief system. We all have our own way of processing information, and I have zero interest in focusing on what's right or wrong. I see information as something to facilitate our individual journeys. And so everything that I offer isn't about I'm right for all time and always, praise me. This is me processing the information just like you, only coming from a deep well of knowledge that most people don't have in the scientific community. I entered into this community because I was interested in these ideas. A lot of the math lines up with spiritual principles I've been aware of for a very long time. A lot of the solar events, the cosmic rays, matches up with, esoteric wisdom. I mean, there's so much overlap, I could never cover it. And so I'm only interested in the bottom line, and that bottom line is who do I want to be and what do I want to do in this process? And my version is to really embrace my humanity, because I believe that our physical human self is the best way to cope with what will be happening around us. Because like I said, the more control people lose over their environment, usually the more freaked out they get. And the only point of control that we'll have is within ourselves. And that's really my area of focus. So I invite you to click on the link below and visit me over at 18 Crossroad and give that first podcast a listen. Ultimately, they're part of a daily program I'm coming up with, which is really about how to focus, walk, and let go over the course of each day. And so these podcasts are really part of the walk. So it's about getting outside every day and about using that time maybe to take in information. So this is an entryway into a bigger idea that I am still trying to put together. So with that, we're going to take a big old deep breath. There is a lot to think about when we talk about maybe the end of the world as we know it. But for now, we're just doing a countdown, and I'm inviting you to do it with courage, and we're going to be doing that also over at 18 Crossroads. So if you like these, go ahead and subscribe. These will be, I'll put up short videos to just remind you that the podcasts are over there. So these will be synopses. But until next time, we'll see you there.